سلام به کانال یوتیوب من خوش اومدید. توی این ویدیو موضوع این روزها یعنی تنش‌ها بین جمهوری اسلامی و آمریکا و اسرائیل رو با دیوید شولتز استاد علوم سیاسی دانشگاه هملاین آمریکا مورد بحث قرار دادم. توی این گفتگو علاوه بر صحبت درباره تحولات اخیر در ایران از آتشبس نصف و نیمه‌ای که صورت گرفت تا خبر بنبست و از سرگیری مذاکرات هم صحبت شد. With reports that the negotiations with the United States have reached a deadlock, how
Right.
likely do you think a return to military conflict is?
A couple of different things. First, I mean, like you pointed out, the negotiations have broken down. I never held out very much hope that the negotiations would lead to any kind of lasting or regional peace. But I also think at this point, neither the United States nor Iran want to go back to a conflict at this point. I mean, neither side have anything to win from it. And Trump clearly wants an exit strategy at this point. In the United States, the war is very unpopular. Globally, it's unpopular. He's not achieving his objectives. And so I think he was hoping that the negotiations he could get something that he could declare victory. So I think now what'll happen um, is is that Trump's going to try to figure out some kind of way of still declaring victory and say that, yes, we didn't get anything in the negotiations, but I think he's going to claim and say that regime change occurred in Iran, that we sort of have the Straits of Hormuz open, and he'll say something like he's what degraded Iran's military infrastructure. But if we think about his larger objective, which was at one point to take away potential nuclear capabilities for Iran, he hasn't succeeded. But he's going to try to figure out some type of way of still declaring victory after this, even though, like I said, he didn't get anything. And so he's going to try. I think he's going to try to avoid stumbling into another full scale war. Plus, we've already like your country, what I understand, we've depleted a lot of our military equipment at this point. So I think the United States is hesitant to go back to where it was before.
Actually, a return to a military conflict is not likely to happen, right?
Not in the way that it happened for the last few weeks, at
Mhm.
least between the United States and Iran. I mean, part of the problem with that agreement before was that there was never clarity regarding Israel, Israel and Lebanon, or Israel and Iran, and that's important to think about here. Is that the U.S. might not continue its hostilities or aggression against Iran, but nothing in this agreement seems to be addressing, or this breakdown of the agreement seems to be addressing what Israel may do. And I think Israel's objectives uh, and the U.S.'s objectives are clearly now going in very different directions.
Mhm. Do you think that Donald Trump's team is more focused on a Venezuela-style approach for Iran or full regime change? Because Trump had said earlier that he was looking for someone inside Iran
Right.
during the conference. We also saw that Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, Speaker of
Right.
Iran's parliament, was not on Israel's reported target list. And eventually things moved toward on Islamabad negotiations and talks. After the disappointing result of these talks, do you think Ghalibaf could still be seen as a potential figure for leadership in Iran from Trump's point of view?
Yes. I think he will he may have to live with current leadership, and he may declare that that's already the regime change that he wants at this point. But if we think about, I think, a couple of objectives here. Objective number one which is what seems to have been dominating the United States for several regimes, going back to, Obama, then Biden, Obama, Trump, Biden, now Trump. Again, it's the nuclear capabilities issue. And nothing has changed in terms of that, So Trump doesn't get a victory on that. If that's what he's saying, what victory is supposed to be, to degrade nuclear capabilities. But if his goal was to get more control over Iranian oil, kind of parallel to Venezuela, getting control over Venezuelan oil, he still hasn't achieved that. In a sense that, again, it's debatable whether the Straits of Hormuz are open. He hasn't taken control of Clark Island, and so again, if I just think about those as the two major objectives here, or three objectives again: regime change, nuclear capability, control of oil. As of right now, he hasn't achieved any of those three.
Mhm. And how do the roles and behaviors of the Iranian diaspora influence the conflict, in your opinion?
Hmm.
That's a tough question, huh?
Yeah, it's a really tough question. In terms of influencing the United States, I think the demonstrations were kind of a pretext. And what I mean by that is that I think the Trump administration would has argued that, look at, and this is the Trump administration speaking, that clearly the regime doesn't have popular support. The regime is going out there, killing protesters. We need regime change, so that doesn't happen. Okay. I think that adds pretext to it, but I don't think that's the real reason. I don't think at the end of the day, unlike Iraq, where arguably it was Hussein needed to be ousted, and we wanted to create a democracy. Again, pretext there. Here, I don't think Trump cares about whether or not Iran is Democrat, whether it's secular, whether it's Islamic. I think that's completely beside the point. But again, the demonstrations, I think, at least um, give give him gave him some cover to say that we need to go in to, to what to liberate the country or something. But again, Trump doesn't care about democracy. I don't. At the end of the day, I don't think he really cares about the relationship between the regime and its people.
So, what does he actually and really care about?
What does he really care about? If I had to speculate,
It's all about all these liberating
yes.
Iran and all these conflicts and things. What is it about?
What is it about? I I think it's about 1979. Trump lives in the past, and for a spectrum of the conservative community in America, they're still mad about the 1979 hostage crisis, and in some sense, I think for what almost what's that, nearly 40 years, if my math is correct here, something like that, 45 years, I think there's been a an ongoing concern to get revenge. And the idea is to oust the Iranian government that basically took 52 American hostages. So I think that's part of it. I think it's also fear of an Iran of a nuclear Iran, in the same way that there's a fear that with North Korea being nuclear, we don't have much control over them. So I think it's losing control. But I also think what's driving this here to a large extent is Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. I think that a lot of what's driving this right now is either security concerns for Israel, or, as I would argue here, I think Netanyahu is driving the Trump administration, and Netanyahu and we know Israel has wanted to denuclearize, I guess, denuclearize Iran, for a long time, views Iran as a threat. And so I think a lot of this is being driven by an Israeli U.S. If I can call it an axis or U.S.-Israeli kind of relationship at this point. And part of what I think is happening right now is the fact that I would describe it as this war is the Benjamin Netanyahu re-election campaign. That he's got his party's got elections coming up. He's not very popular. And I think he's using the war as a way of trying to sort of rally support for him and his party when it looks like, again, polls would suggest that his party loses this election. So if you're asking a question here, I don't think there's any one single clear objective. So if I were to call it revenge, anger, being driven by rivalries with Israel, Iran, I think there's a whole bunch. But in the President Trump's speech about 2 weeks ago to the United States, I mean, he failed to articulate goals, objectives, or anything. So we're all kind of speculating on what it is.
If you consider a revenge because of 1979, so that whole thing, the 1979 thing, happened by the Islamic regime. So maybe he, according to this,
Right.
he really wants a full regime change, doesn't he?
It's possible. Maybe he wants again, maybe he just wants a secular Iran, some secular government, whether it's Democratic or Republic or not, it's certainly a possibility. But the idea that an Islamic Republic took American hostages, in 1979, if he ousts that, and I put the emphasis on the Islamic, gets the Islamic aspect out of it, maybe he declares that victory.
Why haven't other U.S. presidents sought for something like this? Why haven't they sought for revenge? Why just Donald Trump is seeking for that? This is my question.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is that Trump acts on emotion, doesn't follow intelligence, doesn't follow military advice, et cetera, and just sort of acts and reacts like an angry person here. And he came of age, again, many years younger when the United States, excuse me, sorry, when the United States had his hostage taken, and I think that's been fixed in his mind for nearly 50 years. I think other presidents have been more willing to act on advice of allies, act on restraints in terms of how maybe international law would constrain U.S. behavior. So for Trump, I think that's part of it. The second thing is, and we see this in the United States right now too, Trump is trying to build a legacy. With all the stuff he's doing in the United States, by putting his name on coins, putting his pictures up, et cetera, et cetera. And I somehow think he thinks that that getting revenge against Iran becomes the legacy. That's his legacy. Now, in a very odd way, also, he is very bothered by the fact that Barack Obama won the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, whether Obama should have won the Peace Prize or not is a whole different story entirely. And Trump has this fixation thinking that he is solving all these regional conflicts when he hasn't. And so maybe here it's part of building legacy, thinking he wants that all these other presidents have failed. He's gonna be the one who fixes things. And so remember when he first ran for president, his speech in 2016 to the Republican National Convention was basically saying that only he can fix things. And so it's about ego and belief that he can do certain things that nobody else can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's go more forward. And if we look at this, all of this carefully, we saw that China and Russia did not strongly and especially support Iran. And on the other hand, even NATO and Western allies did not fully back the United States, unlike the 2003 Iraq War.
Right.
If the conflict continues, do you expect the same behavior to hold?
At this point, this is clearly Trump's war. And I don't see any shift in terms of global support for Donald Trump on this one. I mean, he's pretty isolated at this point. I mean, the things that become fascinating to look at here is that uh, Trump seems to be trying to um, warm up relationships with Putin and Russia, which explains sort of like his questionable support for NATO and Ukraine. But if the information is correct, Russia is providing logistics or maybe even other types of support for Iran. So is China at this point. And so what I don't think Trump has seen, first off, is the broader linkages that this war has, to how he views Russia and China. Second, is that this war actually is benefiting, let's say, Russia to a large extent. It's diverting U.S. attention from Ukraine. It's splitting the NATO coalition. Some people are speculating that this could lead to the U.S. pulling out of NATO. So in a lot of ways, what this war is doing is just further isolating the United States in the world. And I did a piece recently and argued that what this is doing is really weakening the United States because part of the strength of the United States since World War II has been its ability to build alliances, whether it's with Europe, whether it is, with NATO, whoever like that. But this is clearly costing the United States its alliances and its authority. And again, I just don't see the other countries. Again, let's just say Europe at this point. I don't see them willing to join the war. And they basically, again, have said, this is your war, Trump. And given the fact that he's also has alienated these other countries with his tariff battles, I mean, this just adds to the U.S. isolation with allies and the rest of the world.
We've seen the US move a part of its military focus from Southeast Asia to the Middle East. Does this mean Washington feels confident about the situation between China and Taiwan, or was it forced into this shift? And another question is that, and could China use this moment as an opportunity to act on Taiwan or not?
The answer is yes. I mean, yes to the latter question here. I mean, we know that China has said they would like to be ready by 2027 to have the military capabilities to retake Taiwan if they want to. This war is clearly weakening by shifting resources, clearly weakening U.S. military capabilities in Asia. Again, we've depleted a lot of armaments at this point, and so that this does, on one hand, open up the ability right now of China if they wanted to take military action because we don't have the capabilities right now of now spinning and also putting our resources back over there. On top of which, the war in Iran takes away the moral high ground from the United States. That by going in there, it also not only bombing Iran not only adds let's or emboldens Moscow to say, well, if you've gone into Iran, we can go into Ukraine. But it also gives justification to China saying that you used force in Iran, we're going to use force in Taiwan. So again, this if part of the war also in Iran was to bring more global stability. In fact, if anything, it's brought more instability to the Middle East, Asia, and also more instability, I would say, even into China. The U.S. has meetings coming up with China soon, and I have to think that the actions in Iran are going to complicate any U.S. negotiations or weaken the U.S. negotiating hand with China.
David, if you would say it in one sentence, what has been the biggest strategic mistake made by each side in this crisis?
Okay. The biggest strategic mistake for the United States was actually starting the war, a war in which there were no clear objectives and no clear benchmark for an exit strategy. For Iran, I think it was underestimating how irrational or unpredictable Donald Trump could be, thinking that he would never start a war or never start a fight.
What do you propose here to reach an agreement? Here, the Islamic Republic does not agree on uh, zero nuclear energy and actually expanding any missiles on anything, whatever actually the U.S. wants. And the Islamic Republic does not agree on that. And on the other hand, U.S. wants these things from this regime. So what do you, as an expert, propose here to reach an agreement from both sides, you know?
Yeah, I think I think what's going to wind up happening here is that um, Trump will have to become happy at this point, saying that, okay, oil gets to flow through the Straits of Hormuz, so the straits get opened again. Um, it'll be some type of vague agreement, maybe some type of vague agreement that says that almost looks like the agreement that was in place before under Obama about maybe something that delays or slows down, or Iran gives some type of vague pledge about saying that it's not doing enrichment of nuclear materials for a bomb. And maybe then Trump does some type of an agreement that says, okay, oil flows through. Uh, we will have some uh, we will have some, I don't know, control's not the word I'm looking for. Some say in the oil coming out of Iran, you can sell it on the open markets or something like that so that it drops the price of oil across the world. But it's going to be, I think, a very, very vague set of agreements that in some sense, probably take us back to where we were. I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to say a month ago or to where we were a year ago. It's almost going to be like it takes us to status quo ante. Again, the variable still is Israel at this point. But Trump has a habit of doing this, is that he doesn't like something, takes a whole bunch of destructive action, and it winds up what's happening is we're back to where we were originally and declares it a victory. And so that's sort of what I think is going to happen here.
I would really like to know about the opinion of the American people themselves. What do they think of the conflict? Are they supporting Trump, what Trump has done, or they have any other opinion? What do they think?
Okay. So right now, the most relevant and the best public opinion polls have about 60 to 65% of the American public opposing the war in Iran. Now, clearly, there is a political divide. His core base of support, his core base, which is about 35 to 30, let's say 35 to 40% of the US population, they support the war. But Democrats are opposed to it, independents are opposed to it, but overall about 65% are opposed to the war and don't support his handling of it. What's also important to note here is that, again, the polls are suggesting that only about 14 to 15% of the American population would actually support deployment of the phrase boots on the ground, actually military deployment of individuals. So the war is hugely unpopular. It has led to a significant increase in fuel and gas prices in the United States. And it's complicating even more the ability of the Republican Party to hold on to Congress. It was already questionable whether Republicans could hold on to Congress. But with the dramatic increase in inflation, fuel prices, and so forth, this war is hugely, hugely unpopular.
What about the massacre that happened a few months ago in Iran? That was a human tragedy. What do they think about that?
You know, unfortunately, most Americans aren't thinking about, uh, let's say, the human costs of the war to Iran. They're thinking about the cost to the United States in terms of, we've had several soldiers already die. Again, gas prices for automobiles have gone up, inflation's going up. And I think the United States is looking at it from that perspective, and really not looking at it again from the perspective of the human tragedy or the destruction of civilian infrastructure. And I'll even just say, what was it a few weeks ago? It was what the girls' school, which what is it? Over 100 girls were killed, if I remember correctly. But that that sort of makes the news for a second, but disappears. That's not what's driving American public opinion. It's the idea that what we were in Afghanistan for a generation. We were in Vietnam for a generation. It is about how it's just impacting domestic issues, and unfortunately, not its international consequences.